Welcome to the Rewilded Human Podcast, where Dr. Lucille, holistic psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and Dr. Lynn, naturopath and nutritional consultant, help you reconnect with your true self. Through practical tips on mental health, nutrition, exercise, relationships, and spirituality, with a dash of humor, they tackle today's toughest issues to guide you back to a harmonious, vibrant life. Rediscover your natural self, just as nature intended.
Welcome, everybody, to the Rewilded Human Podcast, where today Dr. Lynn and I are going to discuss a very common experience that people are having these days, but that really isn't yet, I think, being dealt with properly in a way that really helps people, and that is divorce. So if you've had a divorce, if you're going through a divorce, if you are seeing your marriage headed towards that, this will be the episode for you. Lynn and I were both inspired to do this because I attended a one-of-a-kind event here in Toronto, Canada. It was called the Soulful Divorcée, and it was a show all about divorce. Now, I think this whole topic has become really front and center because divorce has burgeoned. You know, the divorce rates are much higher. They're higher in age categories that we hadn't seen before, like gray divorce, which is divorce over the age of 60. And so many people are having the experience or know somebody who has the experience. And really, there is an industry now, a huge industry that has been created around divorce. And it is, I think it's one of the traumatic experiences that is still not quite seen as traumatic as it really is. Anyway, I wanted to just mention that because you're going to see a lot more of that, I'm sure. This is an industry that is growing and growing and growing to help people who are going through divorce. Lynn, you're a happily married woman.
I am.
Right?
Yes.
And you're one of the rare ones. I can tell you right now. You are looking more rare.
And why is that, Lucille? Why are divorce rates up so much? What's happening? What are you seeing in your practice?
I think there are many theories about that, but one thing that I feel is true is that, well, women have more freedom. We have more resources. We are not stuck anymore. If you're in a bad marriage, like my parents' generation, if you're stuck in a bad marriage, that was the norm. For a woman, you had no place to go. And women at that time, which was like in the Paleolithic era, this was the 50s, 60s, it was not common for women to have professions or to be working outside of the home. And so they were literally stuck. Their financial survival depended on them being in a marriage. And if they had kids, they were doubly stuck, right? Because they would have no way of, they would face the horror of divorcing, and maybe the guy takes the kids, or they would be totally rejected from their community, because that was such a stigma at the time, right? Now, I mean, society is more open. We question, we have so much freedom. And the key element, I think, is that women do not rely on men any longer for their financial security. So I think that has given women the power to make decisions and not have to stay in a really.
Like, are we sometimes giving up too easily? Like, is divorce too easy, too accessible?
That's an excellent question. You know, one woman I met at the show was very interesting because her whole coaching business was based on how to prevent people from going over the cliff of divorce. So she works with couples to prevent divorce from happening. I think it's a very complicated subject, right? Because it depends on the individuals who are in the marriage, how mature they are, how much experience they've had, how much they feel they need to either fulfill themselves and expand more, or they feel like they want a safe, secure, unchanging relationship. I mean, there's so many things that go into this. When you marry, I mean, you're at a certain stage of your existence, your personal development, that means you're on some kind of journey. And you can't always assume that your partner is going to be with you in step with you along that journey, it is very likely that you may part ways. One of the things that I learned, and I always told couples when I was working with them in marital therapy, is that, you could, gain loads of insight, and you could feel like you're much more aware of what's going on in the marriage and all that. But the point is, if you are doing work on yourself, or you're doing work on your marriage, the risk is the marriage will end. That is one of the risks. You can't go into marital therapy naively thinking, oh, our marriage is going to get better, because you may find out we're not really suited for one another, and I want something different. It's
No,
just the way it happens, right?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
I can totally understand, women that get stuck in these marriages that like suck the life and soul out of you, and you have to live your whole life like that. I was just the other day thinking about the relationship that I had before. I wasn't married before my husband, but I was with someone for 8 years, and we were engaged and everything. We were planning our lives together. I often think back what my life would have been like if I would have stayed in that relationship, how it would have worked out. And something just, I'm going to be in this movie this summer, right? That I'm filming in this movie. And my husband right now, he is so supportive. He's so sweet. He's so cute. He's like, oh, my wife's going to be an actress. And he's so excited. He's very, very sweet about it. And I was doing some acting when I was younger in Toronto, some acting and modeling in my early 20s. And my ex hated it. He was jealous. He was possessive. He would lock me in the house. He would call me every name in the book. It was hell. And I gave that all up. And even though I loved it, I loved doing it, but I just like put it on the back burner. I completely forgot about it for the past over 30 years. It never even occurred to me to attempt to do anything like that. So now when this opportunity came, in my soul, I'm like, oh my God, like, how is this going to be received? What's my husband going to say? Like, why do you need to do that? Like, who do you think you are? Your age, you know? And then to have this husband who is like so cool, so supportive, it's just, it really made me reevaluate my life and how my whole life would have been with someone who doesn't support you, who just pulls you down, knocks you down, doesn't want you to succeed, doesn't want you to do anything. Like, how sad is that? And all the crazy things that I'm doing, I'm a podcaster, I'm writing books. I hardly have time for him. I'm doing a million things. And he supports me 100%, never belittles me. He's proud of what I'm doing. And, that's the secret. That's why I'm here after 30 years.
Absolutely. So if you'd married the other guy, you probably would be divorced by now,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. For sure. Absolutely, for sure. But isn't it amazing that, I mean, on one hand, it's very sad that people didn't have that option before, or it was so difficult. On the other hand, I do think sometimes people give up too easily. They're not putting in the effort as much to save the marriage because it's just very easy to walk away.
I would agree. I would agree. I think people have this idea that if I just had the right partner, I'd be happy, without looking at themselves as well. Each person is responsible for what happened in the marriage. You both have responsibility there. So even if you do come to the certainty that this partner is not for me, okay, but that means that you still have to work on yourself, because you are the one who got yourself into this marriage. And if you don't work on yourself, if you don't take what you've learned about yourself from the marriage and up level yourself, work on yourself, you're going to attract the same kind of partner again.
Exactly, 100%, 100%.
Yes,
and that was the thing. After my relationship ended, I did so much inner work, so much work on myself, and I was able to change and level up and attract a completely different person in my life. So that's so important, and people don't realize that. And and you were married before, Lucille, right? Twice.
Twice. And and I, to some extent, I'm married similar kinds of guys, but I realized that the common denominator was actually my lousy self-esteem.
Oh, really?
In both
I can't
cases.
imagine you with a lousy self-esteem.
Well, thank you very much, because that's an indication to me that I did enough work on myself that I
definitely did. Definitely.
But I that is a very classic experience, that when you do enough work on yourself, you are no longer even attracted to the same type of partner as you were in the past. You just don't. You attract a different kind of person as well. So it's always a sign of healing when you can wake up one day and say, I don't even remember who that person I was when I was in that marriage, who that person was. It seems a bit distant from me now. And when you notice that you are in no way attracted to the kind of guy who's your ex-partner or
Yeah.
woman, whatever,
Yeah.
it's a sign that you are healthier.
Yeah.
So, yes, so that big transition that I see now from the time when I was very young and I was first aware of divorce, and now is that now there is so much more emphasis on leveling up, thriving after divorce, taking
Yeah.
what you've learned from the experience and creating a better life for yourself. So that was the theme really of this show. And
Tell us about the lady you met.
oh yeah, so this is very interesting because it was a show where you could tell looking at the people, the demographic was mostly middle-aged and younger women. Very few women my age, but and they were all, really enjoying themselves. They obviously, whatever trauma they had, they were there because they wanted community, they wanted to intermingle and network and up-level themselves and the whole thing. And they all exuded a kind of lovely warmth and happiness about them. I happened to meet a woman in the lineup who was very different demographic. She was identifiably Muslim because she wore the headscarf. Lovely woman though, and not afraid to talk to people. And I thought, okay, I'll like to learn something about you. You look so interesting. And what she told me was really a horrible tale of divorce. And what she said was, as we were spending more time at this show, I would come back to her and talk to her every once in a while. She said, I do not relate to anybody here. So I don't know that I'm getting anything out of this, because to her, everybody else looked like they had it made. Okay, you had a divorce, but you probably got a settlement, you got money, you have your work, your profession, whatever, you have your friends. Okay, you got a divorce, but it wasn't like what I did. And it turned out that she was from Iraq. She and her husband married there. They came here to Canada. He developed some businesses. She was a stay-at-home mom, which is part of her, the Muslim culture. She had 3 children. And when she was pregnant with her fourth, the guy up and left her to move to the States. And I think he liquidated all his businesses. He hid all his money, blah, blah, blah. And she was like completely abandoned with very, very few resources, because she was part of the Iraqi community, but not really connected with them in a way that she really felt trusting that they would support her. Because in her culture at that time, I don't want to know what it's like now. At that time, she said she would have either been totally rejected by them for being divorced, or they would have pitied her. And she didn't want either of those reactions. So literally, this woman, fish out of water in a different culture with virtually no supports, determined that she had to take care of her kids. She had to survive. So she was going to do anything it took to survive. She was left penniless, nothing. And so what she did was, the first thing she did, which I thought was really great, is she went to English classes so she could improve her English. And she couldn't afford babysitting while she was there. So her 12-year-old, her 12-year-old child babysat the other kids. And she worked really hard. She developed her English. And then she started, getting some, odd jobs here and there. And eventually, she worked her way up to becoming a personal care worker, and which she loves. She loves the job. But in that time, she couldn't buy toys for her kids. They had to sleep, all of them together on one mattress on the floor of a dingy little apartment. She often did not know where she would get money for food. It was a horror for her, and she didn't have any supports, and she, what didn't trust that she could find supports in the community. Now, as she, eventually picked herself up, she did, find friends. She developed friends and all of that. She was very proud that she had her own car. She could drive her car, and she loves her job. But she said, I cannot relate to any of the other women here because they are not experiencing what I experienced. And I thought, well, that may well be true looking at things superficially, but I personally know from some of my clients that they may look great on the outside, but on the inside, what they're really going through is hell. And some of them have gone through remarkable amounts of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, financial abuse, but they will dress up and they will look great in public. They'll play the part. Mm-hmm. So I very much empathized with this Muslim woman, but I also in my mind was thinking, I don't know that she really gets the complexity of what goes on behind closed doors. No. I really don't know. But her experience really also showed me, again, it was so inspiring because I thought, you know what? People going through divorce still to this day, they have a hard time talking about it openly. They have a hard time finding supports. It's kind of like it's often brushed off a little bit, like somebody died in the family. Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. And then, but on to the next chapter of your life is the assumption, right? But divorce can be very traumatizing, especially if it comes suddenly. There's some experience that happens where you have learned that you've been betrayed, there's infidelity, your husband just up and leaves. I've heard that a number of times. So not unlike this Muslim woman's story. And you are just shocked. You're traumatized.
It can be worse than dealing with a death. It could be more traumatic.
Absolutely. It can be more traumatic because there are so many unresolved emotions, so many unanswered questions. It shakes people to their core in their self-esteem, and it makes them question their own sanity. It's kind of like, how did I not know that this was going to happen? What did I miss? Yeah. Was I completely out to lunch? And then they question everything. Even the good times get contaminated now. Was it really a good time, or was he pretending, or she pretending the whole time? And I have seen it happen to men as well. It's not just women.
And it's actually right now, it's more women that are initiating divorces than men.
Yes, it is true. That's very, very true, especially in the older age groups.
Yeah.
It's a high percentage. I think I can't remember the percentage, but it's certainly over 50% of the gray divorces are initiated by the woman who's finally had enough and realizes that, hey, there's a whole big world out there. I don't have to stay home to take care of the kids anymore. I want to have a life before I die. And it's not going to be with this guy. So,
Lucille, in an earlier episode, we had a question from a listener. She was living in Turkey and she was getting ready to leave her husband without any money and leaving her whole life behind to go back to the UK and leaving all of her friends, her social network, everyone behind, and starting a new life completely alone. I really wonder what happened to her. I mean, that's awful. I wonder if she did it. I wonder how she's doing. I've thought about her a couple of times.
Well, I think that is, we all get that pang of fear and admiration, when we think about what this woman or women like her go through.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great things about divorce now is that people are much more aware that you need to create community to support you. It's always been a solitary journey, divorce, right? You might have had a friend or two that you could confide in, but even you couldn't even trust that your friends would even understand what you're going through, or that they'd be totally supportive if they hadn't gone through it too, right? So people are reaching out, Facebook groups, self-help groups, so many communities. And that was also the theme. One of the themes of this show was we all need community.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it was we all need a sisterhood, and that which I think is a real departure from the way it was before, because there are now so many people who are going through divorce, that you have a community automatically now. There is a community
It's
out
so
there,
nice.
yeah, it's so nice, even if it's not among your closest friends.
Because
There are
sometimes your
people.
closest friends might turn away from you. Because, for example,
Yes,
you're hanging out as couples all the time, and all of a sudden
absolutely.
now you're single. Now you're a threat to the other men,
Yes,
possibly, right? Or to the other women
yes.
in
Yeah,
the
you're like a free radical in the body,
exactly,
right?
right? And then people kind of pull back from you, or they don't invite you
Yeah.
if they're doing
Yes,
couple things. Then it's going to be awkward
yes.
for you. So I think it can be very difficult for some people. So it's such an amazing thing, amazing time that we're living in now, that there is more support. There are these groups,
Yes.
the good
Yeah.
side of social media, where you can
Yes.
connect with other people and you don't feel so alone.
Absolutely. And another thing that is really true, that it really diminishes that toxic shame that people have around things like divorce, where it used to be that you were so stigmatized if you went through a divorce, you were a loose woman, or you were a failure, or whatever. And now, when so many people are out as divorcees,
Yes.
you can let go of the shame so much more easily, and you can just get on with developing yourself and creating a better life. Like, everybody there was into coaching or getting therapy, or all of that good stuff to help us really take that experience and turn it from trauma to something of great value, to transmute it into a much better life. Now, that's the ideal, and I'm not naive enough to think that all women who go through this experience achieve that ideal. I think most people still go through divorce and they don't really work on themselves.
Mhm.
But for those people who are now at the cutting edge and really realizing, no, there is just no option. I've got to level up. That I think is beautiful. And a lot of people do find at that time, they develop a stronger spiritual
Mhm.
connection as well.
And they start
So
taking care of their bodies, exercising, losing weight,
yes,
eating healthier.
exactly, and re-examining all of their values, and healing all their old traumas, and developing a self-esteem. Like, for sometimes the first time in their lives, they have to develop a loving relationship with themselves. That's a big, big challenge. And I think too, it's important for us, if we know that somebody is going through a divorce or a really hard time in their marriage, to not be afraid to reach out. you know and even, like, I was thinking about this Muslim woman. I was thinking, if I had known her, if she was somewhere in my neighborhood or whatever, and I knew something about her, would I reach out to her if I didn't already know her in some way personally? And I thought, probably not. And this is not to be racist or anything, but it's kind of like, I assume that in her community she would have already the supports, and why would she need a complete outsider
Yeah.
to, you know, uh, check in with her? But then I thought, no, it doesn't matter what racial background you're from or cultural background. Sometimes you just don't always fit in. You don't have the supports. So if you know somebody who's going through that, why not reach out? It doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be, I'm sorry, I heard you're going through a hard time, and I wish you well. And if there's anything you need, here's my contact information. It's something very, very
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah. I'm
Can
sure the
make a
person
huge
would be,
difference.
I'm sure the
Yeah.
person would be thrilled to have someone reach out,
Yeah.
because you never
Yeah.
know what someone's going through, or how they're suffering in silence, or what kind of
Mhm.
support network they have. So yeah,
Yes.
that's a good way not to assume anything.
Yes.
You know, there was also a famous person at this
There was a
event.
famous person, and she turned out to be the main feature of this whole event, and that
Tell us
was
about this famous person.
this famous person who is not a household name, but you know her role. She's the ex-wife of Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister of Canada, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, who was totally captivating. And of course, she could not talk about the details of her divorce
Yeah.
or anything personal. I did not know enough about her, and I was quite amazed. This woman has done so much work on herself. She already had a kind of higher consciousness because she was in the yoga community and she had some spiritual, practices and things like that. And she gave a speech. Well, it wasn't a speech. It was actually, she was being sort of interviewed, fireside chat, they called it, about what she'd learned in her life journey. And she's a mental health advocate. I know she's gone through her own mental health issues. And she wrote this book. I believe it's called Closer Together. And she did enormous amounts of research on the human condition, on things like loneliness, authenticity, trust. She interviewed all the big name researchers and people like Gabor Mate, who apparently is a close friend of hers.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so she not only, it wasn't like an academic presentation. She was, as she was telling the story of what she'd learned, she was so engaging, and it felt like she was talking directly to everybody in the audience. Very, very authentic herself, very lively, vibrant person, and quite humble. So she was really very charismatic, and I thought, okay, how did you end up with him?
I was going to say that, but you know what? I need to send my Canadian passport in for renewal, so I thought I'd better not say anything. You can say it, you're there. Mine's up for renewal,
Oh,
so I'm just gonna be a good girl
yes.
until I get the new one for the next 10 years.
Yeah, so far your passport renewal is safe, but
But what she said, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So so anyway, I think she was right on the mark. She said so many things that were very wise about our journey in life, just as human beings, and how it's so important to deal with those big issues like loneliness, and how to be really genuine and authentic, how to learn trust if you've never had it. And she did reveal that she came from quite a dysfunctional family with two alcoholic parents, and so it was an uphill climb for her. And so I think that it helped tremendously to see someone who's in an elevated position, shall we say, in life, we can relate, who says something to us that indicates they're also relating to us on that level of the human journey, right? I think it was very, very important for a lot of the women there to see, that even though she couldn't talk about all the trials and tribulations of what she went through,
We can
they can imagine, right? And to be in the public eye as well as it's happening. Oh God, I cannot imagine the pressure. And especially she has three children. So, and having to shield, protect your children from the unfair scrutiny of other people. That's a huge challenge. So yeah, it was very, very eye-opening on many levels. And I think that the important thing was how much people could be open about what they were going through and find connection with the other people there. So yes, it was, and it probably won't be the last of its kind as a public event. I know that there is more about this in the States, And if anybody's on Instagram, you can find influencers there who are into the divorce space, giving lots of coaching and inspiration to people who are divorcing, and lots of events down there for people who've divorced. It's kind of rare here in Canada. I haven't heard of another show like this.
I've never heard of this before. I don't know if we have anything like this in Europe, but it's very interesting for sure. So Lucille, to sum it up, what would you say who is a soulful divorcee? What does that mean?
I'm not quite sure of the definition, because the one thing that was lacking was context for the show. We didn't really get any kind of anybody speaking about what does a soulful divorcee mean, or any of that. I would have to kind of delve in a little bit more into the content of the organizer, who has written a book. So I don't know what that means, unless it just generally means that divorce can be a time where you connect with a greater sense of purpose, or perhaps spirit, that will keep you on the journey of your life, that will keep you and help you to thrive on the journey. That would be my interpretation, but I haven't heard it yet from the organizer or anybody else at the show.
I love your interpretation. I think they should patent that. That's really good.
Well, I am curious, now that you brought it up, do people talk much about divorce in Europe? Like, are there groups? Are there is there an industry around divorce in Europe?
Not that I've seen, to be honest.
Oh, really?
But I kind of live in a bubble as well, right? So there could be, and I'm sure it's different in every country. I'm in the Mediterranean, where the divorce rates are much lower than the rest of the world.
Yes.
A lot of people are very religious. I don't really know of a lot of divorced people, and we lived in Malta for a long time, for example, and in a very small community, and all the neighbors that we knew then are all still married. It's like all happy families, how I see them on Facebook. And all the kids, when they start dating when they're 13, 14, they get married when they're 18, 20, and they're together for the rest of their lives. And
oh my God.
But it seems to work. Like when we were there, we really saw like happy communities, happy families. But it's a very different environment. Again, it's like a little bubble, a little small island. And so it's very different. Also in Spain, I think when you go into the small places, the small villages and stuff like that, I think divorce is quite rare. So I don't know if the people would have the same kind of support that they would have like English-speaking countries, where it's a lot more common. So there could still be a lot of shame around it, or maybe people do stay when they don't want to stay. They end up staying for much longer. But there's also a much stronger family connection. I see, and people spend a lot of time together. As soon as the sun is out, everyone's out walking together, hand in hand. Many generations together. You see the little ones, the mom, the grandma, the great grandma, the whole families together. So I think that really helps with keeping families together as well. When in marriage you have a strong support system on both sides of the family, I think that's also very helpful.
Right.
And I think in English-speaking countries, it's very different. You may see your mother once a year for Thanksgiving, and that's it. And I think in the Mediterranean, it's very different for the time anyway.
It may be changing as we speak. Who knows?
Quite possibly. Everything's changing.
Everything is changing.
I just watched the video, not related, but might as well share it. So this guy is in, I think, Thailand with a lady boy, and he's saying, I'm not gay, I'm just with this lady boy, and it's love, and people don't understand, but that doesn't make me gay just because she has a penis, and some women have penises and some women have vaginas, and just like, so this is where we're heading. This is the future. Like, women can have now vaginas, penises, whatever, anything goes. So, those things are not helping the like the marriage and the, the what's that word that I'm looking for?
Sanctity.
The sanctity
Yes.
of marriage and relationships. And so it's nice to see that stuff is kind of still evading us, and things are still working a little bit more normal here for the time being.
Well, in fact, I think there's a backlash going on now in North America against that kind of everything goes. You can be a man, woman, cat, dog, whatever you want to be. I think there's a big backlash starting to happen
That's
here.
good. It's because it's getting a bit insane. And ultimately, I do think that in a society is ultimately built on family, on the family structure. And part of the family structure is the man and the woman who are married, they have children, grandchildren, and that's how humanity continues and survives. So I still think that's really important. While I think it's important that women or even men have the option to divorce if they don't have the right person, I think it's still really important to encourage the family unit and to encourage our roots and what made us human, and to be part of the community and there's nothing stronger than a family unit.
Yes, and it keeps the entire society stable.
Exactly, and people are much more difficult to control when they are a unit. And I think bonded, exactly, and you have someone to fight for because it's your blood, and so this is why they don't want us having children. They don't want us to belong to anyone.
Exactly.
Just connect to the internet. You've got your virtual friends. You don't need, because then you have nothing to fight for, right? So there's also that evil agenda behind the scenes as well.
Right.
So what would you say to someone, so when they're rebuilding their life after a divorce, how can they learn to trust again? Because I think that's the biggest thing. It's usually the trust is shattered. Your self-confidence is shattered. So we talked about how you need to work on yourself. You need to get your self-confidence back. A lot of women make positive changes. You start vibrating on a different level. You're hopefully attracting a different kind of person. But how do you build the trust? When you meet that right person again, how can you trust again?
Well, a lot of that also has to do with the traumatic experience of divorce, which, any traumatic experience will shatter trust. So if it's, really so difficult, people will cling to mistrust as a way of protecting themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And if you are aware that that's not a healthy way to go through life, then it is really important to heal from the trauma of the divorce. And in healing the trauma, you may note that there have been earlier traumas in your life that feed into the trauma of the divorce, right? And so it's a process. Sometimes you need to find, of course, the right therapist and do the work and be prepared, to meet a whole different set of experiences, or you develop a whole different set of understandings about your life in order to free yourself from the trauma. It's like your whole life is just thrown up in the air and jumbled all over, and then it has to land in some kind of order. And so this process of coming out of trauma and healing from that, I think, has to be primary. Now, even if you don't go to a therapist, maybe you go to a self-help program or whatever, the point is do it, because you won't, the trust is, as I say, it is something that automatically gets shattered in a traumatic experience. So then it really is about understanding that a most important trust relationship to form is the one with yourself. That you can trust your judgment, your inner wisdom, your intuition. It's not about how do I trust other people, because there's no automatic way of trusting other people. It's just that you can't. You have to be with people. You have to, get to know them in different contexts and really feel in your inner self whether this person is trustworthy or not. You will see the signs. But the trust, first and foremost, comes with you trusting your own inner guidance about who could be trustworthy out there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And once you've done the work on yourself, you really do, like, the radar kind of improves. And
Yeah, absolutely.
and when you
Yeah.
really start attracting the right kind of people to you,
Mm-hmm.
then things kind of
Absolutely.
everything changes. And I think those things just kind of come naturally.
Yeah, it's all part of the healing process, which is very natural. Things will start changing up in you without you working really hard on it. Like every day you get up and say, "Oh, I have to do this differently and that differently." All of it, after a while, you will notice that you're just perceiving life differently. You're perceiving yourself differently. You have greater insight into your relationships with other people, and it's just an automatic process. We are all geared to healing and growth.
Yeah.
Everything about us is geared to healing and growth. And the only thing that stops that is our belief systems, sometimes being in situations that we can't get out of, where we're totally trapped in abusive situations, perhaps. But
Stagnation.
truthfully, yes. And so, naturally, normally, everything in you wants to heal and grow.
And
So if
we
you're,
grow through difficult times. Like
yes,
you have to,
yes,
like how the butterfly breaks out of the cocoon, right? It's that kind of
yes.
like you have to sometimes go through really difficult times in order to reach the next level, in order to grow, evolve, and to make your life
Yeah.
better. So
Yes.
there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, absolutely. If you intend it, you're going to get to where you want to go. There's no question about that. You have to be consciously aware and intending that you're going to heal. And then everything starts falling into place. And it can be painful, yes. And a lot of the times it's painful because we have to give up certain cherished beliefs. It's not like we have to go through abuse again. It's that we hold on to our beliefs and our stories so strongly. They form the concrete foundation of our lives. And sometimes the most painful thing is to realize they don't fit reality. They just don't fit reality.
Yeah.
And you got to give that up. And for a lot of people, that is so scary. And that's part of the difficulty of healing, is giving up all of those false beliefs and narratives about life.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Lucille.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that brings us to the end of that's good spot to stop there.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we were able to help anyone out there who is going through a difficult time right now. It was just a really interesting topic, and especially inspired by this event, which I've never heard of anything like that happening. But it's really nice to see that there is more support out there for women. And if you're going through a difficult time, hopefully you will find some comfort, especially in Dr. Lucille's words. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. We always appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And or give us 5 stars if you're listening to the podcast. The 5 stars are very, very helpful to us, and we always appreciate your support. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into the Rewilded Human podcast. We hope you're leaving with insights to reconnect with your natural, vibrant self. Remember, the information shared here is for educational and inspirational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for any personal health concerns. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit. We'll see you next time, ready to dive even deeper. Stay wild, stay true, and stay tuned.